In this video, we are going to set up our project. First of all, we need to download the exercise files. To download the exercise files, go to github.com/ssd-tutorials. And the repository that we are interested in is this advanced-search-form-php. You can look for this repository. If you can't see it as a first item on the list, simply type advanced, and it's going to come up with two different repositories. This one without the PHP at the end is for the older course. This is the latest one. So if we click on this -php, and all we need to do now is click on this download zip. If you are using Git or GitHub or any other account, you can simply fork it and then clone it to your local machine and obviously work with the files this way. But just to simplify things for the time being, I'm just going to download it. If we now open it, as you can see, it's all been decompressed. All I want to do now is remove, actually, if we go back, what I want to do is rename this directory rather than having this master here. We don't need this, just the name of the repository. I'm going to use terminal to move these files. If I just navigate to home directory, downloads, ls to see what we've got is exactly the same as what we just saw in the Finder window. This is the directory we want to move to our code directory. So mv advanced php, and then we go to squiggly line /code, which is where I keep all my code. Again, if you're not familiar with all this, please check our setting up local environment course, which all this is explained. Otherwise, move this directory to wherever you want to have it and where you're going to set up your virtual host later on from. So I'm moving this directory to the code directory. If I do ls, we can now remove this zip file. So remove f advanced, and there we go, ls. There are no files here now. So now I'm going to navigate to my code directory. And as you can see, I have two different directories here. This one is where I keep basically completed project, which I showed you during the introduction video. And this is the one we're going to be working from, which is what we just moved to this directory. So we are going to navigate to it first. So cd advanced search from php, ls to see what we've got inside, lsal to see everything, including the hidden files, which start with a full stop, like git ignore, for instance. So if you are planning to push your project to the repository, obviously you've got everything pretty much set. Now, the first thing we're going to do, if we now navigate to our editor, I'm going to be using PHP Storm for this purpose here. I'm going to click on open because I want to open this project. So code, which is under my home directory, and the one I'm interested in is this advanced search from PHP. Click on OK, and the project opens. And the first thing I'm going to do, let's quickly have a look at the files that actually come with the exercise files. The first directory you'll see is the app directory, which is where all our code will be placed. And it comes with a migration and then another subdirectory and so on. It's basically, it contains the code that will be later on used to generate our tables, the migration basically. We've got two sets of SQL statements. As you can see, each of these files represent the create table statement for, in this case, MySQL. And the same one's going to be used for MariaDB if you are using MariaDB rather than MySQL. And then SQLite, which differs slightly. Same thing, each single table that we have a file for that with SQL query. Then if you open the migration, you can see it uses the database component, which we haven't written yet, so we won't be running this until we have this component written. And it basically it contains basically methods which allow us to create these tables by calling specific methods and so on. Okay, so that's app directory. Then we have assets, which contain CSS and JavaScript files. Inside of the JavaScript files, you've got src with app.js file. This is the file that I've created. If you need to add any extra JavaScript, you can use this file or create another one and include it separately. Entirely up to you. The only thing that we needed actually for this specific course is this SSD select jQuery plugin, which I've written earlier, and it allows us to basically, when you select something from the drop-down menu, in our case it's going to be a basically URL to the page, it takes you to this page, and that's all we basically using during this course. And then in this the dist directories, we have the code basically, which is minified. So we are using Zerp Foundation during this course. Feel free to use Bootstrap or any other styling. Again, source here, within this source we will see basically the file that has been generated with gulp file before minification, but because we create the file first, this app CSS under this source directory, and then we minify everything to this directory. So these are our JavaScript and CSS files. We also have Sass files if you would like to modify anything. This is basically where all the code for all these components is created. So if you're familiar with Sass, obviously feel free to play with this. And then once we install all npm dependencies, you can run the gulp. We have this gulp file ready as well here. As you can see, it includes our assets, SCSS app.css, which is the entry point for our Sass components here. Then it basically outputs this into this CSS source directory, and then we are minifying it. As you can see here, we're taking this CSS file which we've created earlier from Sass, and we minify it using this CSS min. Here, in that case, it basically is gulp -css component, and we export it to this distributable directory. Okay, for JavaScript, we only include jQuery, this plugin, and this app.js, which does exactly the same as we did with CSS, basically compiles it and minifies the file. Okay, so that's gulp file. Then we have index.php, which only contains HTML structure for our form and a list of records later on. As you can see, it automatically has JavaScript file included here at the bottom, and our app CSS as well, right at the top, as well as I'm using here font awesome because I've used, I think, about 2 icons. Feel free to remove it if you don't want these icons. So that's index.php. Then we have package.json, which contains all the dependencies that I'm using during this course for my assets, as you can see, foundation sites, and then all these gulp dependencies as well as this SSD select jQuery plugin. Then we have phpunit.xml, which is basically a configuration file for PHP unit. Everything's set up. Again, you don't have to worry much about this. We will discuss a few points here later on when we start writing tests, but for now we can just close it. And then we have setup.php file, which will run once we have our database component written, which will basically make it easy to migrate all the tables in one go. Okay, so that's the files that we have, which come with the exercise files. Let's now quickly create the composer.json file. So new file, composer.json, and let's start with a set of curly brackets and the auto load. So in between a double quotes, remember we are inside of the JSON file, so you have to use double quotes, no single quotes allowed here. We start with auto load, and then another set of curly brackets, and we're going to go for PSR-4, then colon, and another set of curly brackets, and our namespace, you can choose whatever you want to use. I'm going to simply use app with capital A, and then 2 backslashes, colon, and which directory we want this namespace to point to. It's going to point to our app directory, so app /. That's our autoloader. Now done. If we close the composer, we can open our terminal. First of all, I'm going to run the composer, so composer install, and that will, obviously we haven't got any dependencies at the moment, we will install in just a moment, but this will generate the vendor directory. If I just go back to the project, you can see it generated the vendor directory with the autoloader. If we go back to our terminal, next thing we want to do is install our npm dependencies, which will be pulled from this package.json. So npm install. It will take a little while, so I'm just going to pause this video and come back to you once all this has been installed. Now this is completed, so if you just clear the screen, Command K on the keyboard, by the way. Now don't feel intimidated by all these things that I've just done. Basically, Composer is something that we will be using pretty much throughout this course, but gulp, you can pretty much remove this entire file basically, as well as everything that's inside of this directory, apart from the data.sql, which we will be using, and just create your own CSS files for styling and JavaScript. Just make sure that you include this call to this plugin SSD select exactly the way it is. That's all we basically need during this course. And obviously make sure that you include this SSD select plugin within your index structure as well, separately in that case, obviously, because at the moment we just pull it directly through from this node modules through the gulp file, and it's all compiled into a single file. I'm just using this approach because I like everything compiled and that sort of things, and this is pretty much the sort of structure that I'm using with my projects. Okay, so we've got all this ready. The next thing we need to do is to install a few composer dependencies. So let's go back to our browser and let's navigate to packages.org. Packages.org, there we go. And the package we're interested in is called Illuminate HTTP. There we go, that's the one. That's the package that Laravel uses as well. So if we copy this composer require Illuminate HTTP, we go back to our terminal, paste it. Just make sure that you obviously call all these commands from within the root of your project, which is this advanced search from PHP. If we hit return, this will install this package as a dependency for our project. That's now been done. We can clear the screen, Command K again. Another package that we are interested in is called, and that's actually a package which I've written, it's bastiansulinski.env. It's based on Vluka's php.env package. It's got some additional features here. So if we just copy this composer require, and if we go back to the terminal, hit return again, to install this dependency. The next one will be PHP unit. So PHP unit, there we go, that's the one. Again, let's copy this entire command, paste it in, hit return to install it. And once this has been installed, actually while this is installing, let's go back to the browser and look for another package which is called Faker FZA. Oh, that was the one. FZAninoto/faker. That's the one we need. So if we copy this command as well, this is still installing this PHP unit and all its own dependencies. So let's pause the video for a second and I'll get back to you once all this. Actually, we don't have to. This is now done. Okay, so let's clear the screen, paste the command, hit return, and install the Faker. As you can see, that was quite quick. Actually, Command K to clean the screen, and let's move to the next video.